Welcome to Rauta. This video is done in commercial collaboration with our sponsor, Steelfest. Immortal hails from Rauta. This time it's very fresh review coming for you because this album won't be out until 26th of May. And of course the album's question is Immortal's latest one, War Against All. Before we get to that, however, it's time to do a little bit of a recap of what's going on with Immortal history, which I will go more thoroughly with my crash course video of Nordic black metal, or Norwegian black metal from the 90s. But those who are new to the band, which I find fascinating if there are many, because Immortal is one of the biggest black metal bands out there, despite its differences and, well, some kind of a mess of a history with band members having fights and all that stuff and all those turns of events. But it's still one of those bands that have been very active throughout the course of action, despite what you might see here, years active on Metal Archive side. I mean, they started as early as 1991, so we're one of the very first of second wave black metal bands. If you just basically count out Mayhem from the list, we could make the claim that Immortal was there, maybe the first one actually, but at least one of the many first ones to do black metal with albums and all that stuff, having their debut album already out as early as 1992. But a lot of things have changed since those early years. I mean, when the band was doing their first album, it was kind of a Bathory-like, and then they just changed their course into more fierce type of stuff with Pure Holocaust. And once again, a few albums later, they went more epic directions with, At the Heart of Winter, which many people seem to consider one of the best or maybe the best Immortal album. However, I'm not that big fan of that album, as good as it is, because in my opinion, Immortal truly peaked with already the second album, Pure Holocaust. So it's because a lot of things have changed with the band, especially when it comes to the lineup, which is also explains this big gap here. 9 years of waiting time since All Shall Fail to Northern Chaos Gods. Things are not necessarily what you might expect. Depending once again which albums you're comparing, the latest one, War Against All of 2023 and also. Now, this is 5 years after the previous one, which was after the feud between Abath and Demonaz, the founding members of the band, or the two main characters of the band who defined the sound already in the 90s. But what to expect from an album that is of 2023, putting Immortal once again on the map after those 5 years? Well, if you ask me, Northern Chaos Gods was one of the better albums of the whole era. It's not really as good, in my opinion, to challenge the best ones, but it's definitely among the maybe top three of the albums. Well, this new album might actually change the course because, in my opinion, this is better than I was expecting. Running almost 40 minutes. War Against All showcases a couple of things. First of all, it's a kind of a perfect successor to the previous album, but maybe a little bit even better. Now, at least this very moment, and having recently listened to the whole discography of Immortal, at least albums, not demos and all, but still. And I feel like this is even better than that. And why so? Maybe there's a couple of reasons. First of all, this is a little bit more, I guess, more varied. Not that much going into the epic direction, but actually taking a couple of steps backwards, which might be a disappointing to some people who are expecting more At the Heart of Winter kind of a thing, but who are expecting, those people who are expecting the more fierce, more fast tempoed and less kind of a Bathorisk epicness might actually like this even more. Now there are a couple of pointers which really stand out from this one. First of all, you might pay attention to the screamier vocals, the raspier kind of things, which is the big question mark. Are they going to compare with Abath? I mean, His band is now with 3 albums out, and of course he has taken the Immortal era, into Abath era. And of course, Demonaz writing a little bit different kind of riffs and all that stuff is of course a different band, but probably you keep comparing these vocals together. And in my opinion, I could say Abath does them better. This is not to say Demonaz vocals are bad by no means. In my opinion, they are better than mediocre black metal vocals, but they're a little bit more tight and kind of a screamier in the end. Man, this comes down to matters of taste. I am just fan of more raspier take than this Demonaz more, how to say, kind of a more tightly screwed screaminess. But nonetheless, these vocals are pretty good. And once you get used to them, you are not even comparing to the early Immortal works. But if you are having those older albums still, spinning in your head, like I have because of going through the discography, yeah, you might be unable to just have this comparison happening. I mean, it's hard to stop it happening once your subconscious is, kind of analyzing the whole thing here. But what matters more is that the actual songwriting, especially individual riffs here and there, they are the ones that kind of serve you this dish properly ways. I mean, first of all, the first song that came out as a single was this title track, War Against All, and it already showcases the fierceness of what Immortal has to offer in the year 2023. And it is indeed one of the better songs on this album, so it's a good starting track. But then it is, it was continued by this second single called War God, which is actually quite a good of a track, but in my opinion, it pales in comparison. And some people might have already feeling like, okay, this album is not gonna cut it. It's not that good really because you have like one good song and one kind of a good, but not as good as the first one. So paling in comparison, those first 2 tracks, Thunders of Darkness, is very good, kind of a continuation to the first track. But War got kind of a, slows things down a little bit and says like, okay, we're gonna do Immortal. You have this kind of frosty and grim Blashergian thing going on. It's going to sound like Immortal, kind of a cold. And that is where the production comments got in a bit. Yeah, it sounds kind of organic and kind of cold, but not as grim and reaping and shredding and cutting, making those cuts, those wounds, like the early albums. So yeah, it sounds kind of as if the harshest of the winters is already gone, and now you're just kind of surviving the whole winter, which can be seen both ways. First of all, it's kind of a more lame version of what used to be Immortal. Then again, it's also kind of refreshing to see a band on a biggest metal label, one of the biggest anyways, that is not overly produced. So it's actually quite nicely balanced between the very grim and kind of a rawish and yet organic and not super produced, overly produced kind of a thing. So maybe it's a kind of a grower kind of a thing, but after giving this quite a few spins, I started more and more like it. It's not my favorite kind of production for this kind of fierce, fast, mostly fast black metal, but it fits in. Like the vocals, you kind of get used to them if you are a fan of this kind of music to begin with. So that's not really a problem. But I'm just saying, things could have been even better. This is more about the critical approach. But once you kind of get into these vocals and the production, you're just going to like the ride because it's almost like taking your favorite winter sled and just going down the slope. Sometimes you kind of slow down a little bit only to get more speed when you just find another way down the path, sliding down the mountain. Especially when it comes to the track Immortal, which actually might be my favorite one. It totally surprises you after the 6th track, which is already one of those, let's slow down a little bit, and then it's gonna boom! Kind of starts all over again. And by the time you're finished with that and the 8th track, you're already done with the album. And I'm like, yeah, I could give it another spin because it's good. So overall, I would say this album is very well balanced. It's not too lengthy. The track lengths themselves are, they are kind of a very, very well balanced also. There's only one song on the album which is over 7 minutes, or more like over 6 minutes. And even that doesn't feel like it's too lengthy. But I think the forte on this album are the tracks like War Against All, 3 minutes and 26 seconds or so, and Immortal being roughly 4 minutes and then some. And this is the sweet spot because it already kind of get you in and kind of get to do a certain amount of repetition but not getting too far. So, like I said, it's well balanced in the terms of production and as well as the songwriting, compositions and all. Now, is this my favorite Immortal album? Hardly. You really can't beat Pure Holocaust unless you make Pure Holocaust on steroids. I kid you not. That is, in my opinion, the peak moment. But then again, I think it's way too far for Immortal to go back to that. I mean, even since when things started to change with Blizzard Beasts, and they put out behind the kind of a chaotic ways of battles in the north. I don't think there is really going back to that kind of thing with Immortal. So, all in all, it's a good album, but not magnificent. Is it worth your time if you're Immortal fan? Definitely. Is it worth your time if you're disliking Immortal? Not likely. It's not gonna change how you perceive the band, in my opinion. But it's kind of a fan service, and yet at the same time, it's also kind of a shedding its skin in a way that you're expecting it to be. So not only a good successor, but kind of a like topping the game with even better songwriting, and that comes partially, as weird it may sound, by removing some of those epic metal elements. So maybe it's a little bit going back to old days of Immortal while sacrificing a little bit of that Bathory kind of take of epicness. I know I'm rambling, I'm repeating myself and all that stuff, but I just want to make it clear this is a well-balanced album, and partially so because it doesn't sound a copycat release of the previous ones, nor it sounds like it's heading to new direction. So something new, something old, and that being combined makes this and very, very interesting album in my opinion. So this one is out on May 26th through Nuclear Blast. Two singles already out. Go check them out, and especially the title track. If that is convincing to you, then you're most likely going to like the rest of the album. So with these words, 8 out of 10. Check it out. You will find it on your favorite streaming services closer to the release date. This is Rauta, and see you soon with more reviews coming your way.